Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. We have a little bit of news. The combine's just getting going, which we'll talk about a little later in the week. We're going to look at the quarterback class of 2022, which was not great, Bob. And Dennis and I did a one-round NFL mock draft. We will bring that up. So packed show, but you know, the off season has come, which means weekends look a little different. Instead of Sundays sitting there getting to watch the game, Saturdays getting hyped up for games, you get to do projects. I got to do some cleaning and some laundry. I went with my wife to look at furniture. Dennis, you apparently have become a part-time contractor.
I have, unfortunately. It's not my strong suit. And we're still in the demolition phase. We got the wall down and we've got the pantry opened up. And if the cabinets were delivered today and the cabinet guy said, look, screw you guys, I'm going home, here's your cabinets, we're ready to put them up. We've got that space, everything is done. We could put the cabinets up. I hope they don't do that. But man, I love my wife. I guess what I'm trying to say is I love my wife more than I hate doing construction.
Yeah, and given a little this time of the year, doing a few fun things.
She's put up with my fantasy football pursuits for 8 years now.
You not only have fantasy football, I have all kinds of weird movie stuff, and she will go to some where she just looks at me and she says, if I would have known this was the kind of thing you watched when we were dating, we wouldn't be here right now. So
don't you just go, well, it's my job, honey?
Yeah, that only carries you quite so far, since she knows I actually like some of these things too that she doesn't care for, but she does enjoy some of the perks. Well, let's dive in. We got a pretty big show today. Some news and notes. One player so far has officially gotten a franchise tag. A lot of back and forth whether some other guys will or will not. We should know hopefully more the end of this week, early next week. I think the tag deadline is next Tuesday. But T. Higgins did get the franchise tag, and Dennis, I'm going to tell you, I was mildly surprised. I think we had talked about before, Higgins and Boyd both hitting free agency. Given the cap situation, some of the constraints for the Bengals, I thought they were more likely to bring back Boyd and Higgins would end up getting a big contract on the market, but they put the tag on him. What do you think that means for him, and what do you think that means for Boyd?
So they've come out and said that they didn't tag him with the tag and trade intention. T. Higgins is clearly a much better receiver than Tyler Boyd. I like Tyler Boyd. He's a good receiver. I was in the camp of the Bengals should have drafted Penei Sewell instead of Jamar Chase. I think that's who the tackle coming out that year was. But I'll take my L on that. Chase has panned out. Would drafting a stud offensive tackle have helped Burrow to not sustain more injuries? Maybe, maybe not. You can't prove a negative. But, T. Higgins is good. He's a big body receiver. Last year wasn't great. But even after tagging him, and the tag number is like 21.8 million, they still have $52 million in cap space. So if you can afford to drive a Ferrari, and when you've got Chase and Higgins and Burrow, you're driving a Ferrari, by all means drive it. And as far as Boyd goes, because Higgins is he's got 4 years in the league now, and he's just 25 years old. So it's like he's a young stud receiver. Tag him, see if you can get something done, great. And if you can't, you got him for another year. They're probably not going to tag him next year if they do, because that would be I think it's 125% of what the going rate would be, top 5. So they probably aren't going to tag him again. And as far as Boyd, I think he's looking for some place he can go and compete. One place he might look good, might fit in good, would be Atlanta, across from Drake London. He's a good number 2 receiver. He can play out of the slot. He can play on the outside. He doesn't demand targets at the volume that T. Higgins does. Boyd Boyd could go to Buffalo and step in for Gabe Davis and probably provide a little more consistency, if not the same level of explosiveness. So I think Boyd he's going to get himself a nice contract. He's 29 years old, another 3 to 4 year contract. And when you think back about the class that he came in with, we had some high hopes for some of those guys: Josh Dotson, Laquan Treadwell, Corey Coleman. And Boyd's really the only one that panned out.
Yeah, gosh, that's an incredible list when you hear it out loud in 2024. Johnny Smith, the tight end released by the Falcons. Speaking of those Falcons, supposedly rumored to be on a short list for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Dennis, find someone who loves you as much as Arthur Smith loves forgoing a 2021 drafted tight end to give the ball to Johnny Smith.
Yeah, I'll see it when I believe it. To me, that feels like something where Mike Tomlin's going to go, look, he's 30 years old or somewhere up there. He's getting older. We've got Darnell Washington. We've got Pat Freiermuth. Tight end isn't a position of need. Let's spend that money. But I mean, hell, we didn't expect. We expected Smith to have a better tenure in New England, and we didn't expect him to be the pain in the butt that he was in Atlanta. So he's a good enough player. He's gonna land somewhere. He's probably gonna be a pain in the butt for somebody, but there's teams that need a second tight end that can provide some offensive firepower. I don't know. Firepower is probably too strong a word to use for Jonnu Smith here, but he can provide something.
Yeah, I mean, he actually had a decent season last year. Had some moments with Tennessee. It's that weird Patriots contract that never panned out how we figured. But I'll be really curious because you had mentioned, when we were talking about Freiermuth, wondering what they were going to do with Darnell Washington. If they bring in just a third tight end, I think the wishbone is actually coming back into potentiality for them. They're just going to run backs back there, and especially if they go get Justin Fields, it'll be Fields, Harris, and Warren in the backfield, a couple tight ends on the end of the line, and just call it good. Josh McCown hired as the quarterback coach for the Vikings. Does that move the needle for you much?
He was brought into Carolina to be, the quarterback coach for Bryce Young. And when Frank Reich got canned, he was unceremoniously dismissed. There was definitely a divide in the Carolina locker room, the offensive, or not locker room, coaching staff, the coaching room. There was, because about half of the staff got canned and the other half was like, hey, we're good. So for whatever reason, whether it was McCown, whether it was Frank Reich, somebody in Carolina just didn't feel like they were, it was felt they didn't get much out of Bryce Young. So now he goes to Minnesota where he's working under Kevin O'Connell, who's supposed to be an offensive mind coming out of the Sean McVay tree. Kirk Cousins is a free agent. Right now they've got a handful of dudes. There's some question as to, we've seen in several mocks, we see them being mocked to quarterback. I think McCown can be a teacher in the NFL. When he stopped playing quarterback in the NFL, he was coaching high school football. And at the high school level, you're teaching. That's, there's very few high schools where you're just like suiting up and running like high-powered offenses. You're teaching. It's a lot of kids that aren't going to make college teams, are only going to make Division III teams. And so you have to be able to teach them. It'll be interesting to see. Like, I think we know who Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs and Jaron Hall are, and they're not going to be the starters in Minnesota. So whether it's them bringing Cousins back or bringing in a high rookie, McCown's going to have something to work with.
Have you seen the actual latest? So ESPN today did even had this when they did their projection for everyone that's going to be starting quarterback. There are a couple of people I've seen now that have Russell Wilson going there
to Minnesota.
Yeah, I honestly not
got to go somewhere, right?
Yeah, and the ESPN one said call it Russell Wilson and Bo Nix. So interesting. I don't think Jaron Hall. I'd be surprised if Jaron Hall's even their primary backup, and I'm not sure the other two will end up being on the team. It felt like Dobbs was kind of a one-year rental. I wonder. I'm sure he'll end up somewhere, but be curious. Yeah. Well, talking about quarterbacks that may or may not have a future seems like a good segue to looking at the draft class of 2022 at quarterback, which has not yielded a lot of fruit, at least on the top end. The dead last two we'll talk about, one a 6th rounder, one a 7th rounder, are the only two out of the class to have actually made the playoffs. But we will start at the top going in draft order. And the only first-round quarterback selection that year was Kenny Pickett, went 20th overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has started 12 games in each of his 2 seasons, 7-5 in each season. Kind of interesting. 63% as a rookie, 62% completion last year, has thrown for a total of 4,474 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. Dennis, I would say that is the textbook definition of average. I don't think going into year 3, he's a lock to be the starter. It would be fair to say he, was probably not part of a great offense, since they moved on from their offensive coordinator at the middle of last year with Matt Canada. How are you feeling about Kenny Pickett in Dynasty these days?
I feel the same way about Pickett that I do about Mac Jones. It's like, could he be a serviceable NFL quarterback and a serviceable super flex fantasy asset? He could be, but he's got to be in the right situation. And that situation includes an offensive coordinator that knows how to put him in position to be successful. I don't think anybody is looking at Brock Purdy, for instance, and saying, this guy is a world, but he's getting put in a position where he can make plays and he's got weapons and he's got protection. I think that Pittsburgh need to continue to invest in their offensive line. Give Pickett a clean pocket and let him work. With Pickens and Deontay Johnson, he has a couple weapons. With the running backs, the tight ends, Freiermuth, Washington, Warren, and Harris, there are some pieces there that have been productive even under Matt Canada. It feels like though they're so I was in a meeting the other day, somebody trying to sell me some new human resources software, because when I'm not doing this, I do human resources. And we're on this meeting and he goes, well, Dennis is looking for this. And I had to correct him because I'm very happy with the product that I use now. I said, I'm not looking, I'm listening. Big difference. And I think that's exactly where the Steelers are at. I don't know that they're, could they sell the farm and go get Justin Fields? Maybe. It's Peter King was talking about, if Chicago decides to keep Fields and trade the number one pick, you're looking at 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a player, which is like DJ Moore, which is what they got last year. And, if you can get that, it might make sense to keep Fields, because you're not going to get that for Fields, that's for sure. So I think Pittsburgh is listening, and if the opportunity presents itself to upgrade at quarterback, whether that's with one of these rookies, whether that's with a Russell Wilson or a Kirk Cousins. Now, and you may not think Russell Wilson is an upgrade over Pickett. I do.
This is the other place that he's been rumored to go, and for fantasy purposes, I saw some people saying that they would feel better about George Pickens in that sense, because Wilson has traditionally launched the deep ball. It'll be interesting to see. I think for me, Pickens, I think he's in the mix to potentially be a starter, but will probably end up being a backup. I would still hold him you can't really trade him for anything. I also wouldn't totally outright cut him, but he's got to be a quarterback 3 or 4 at best.
Yeah, he's not. If you pick it right now, you're hoping he can be a starter for you on a rebuild. He was quarterback 28 as a rookie, quarterback 31 last year, and again, he only started 12 games each year, so the potential for him to have gotten up closer to being a QB2 if he had those 5 other games, it's there. He may have been able to produce those numbers. I mean, he cut his interception percentage from 2.3% to 1.2%. That was a good move. He just hasn't thrown a lot of interception or touchdowns. 7 in his rookie year, 6 last year. He needs to get his completion percentage up at 62.5%. You've got to be in the 67, 68, 69 range. And he did increase his yards per completion from 9.8 to 10.3. So there is a little bit of hope there with a couple things. But again, I think, his ceiling is, QB 18, QB 20.
Next up, the next guy in the draft order was Desmond Ridder, who went in the 3rd round, 74th overall. Started 4 games at the back half of 2022 for the Falcons, but went into 23 as the primary starter. Started 13 games, was the starter, got replaced, was the starter again. I believe got replaced again at the end. 6-7 in his 13 starts, completed 64% of his passes, 28-36 in passing yardage, 12 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Also got sacked 31 times, which is not spectacular. Had some rushing success, 193 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns. Also fumbled the ball 12 times. Atlanta has talked about at least getting competition, but if you listen to Raheem Morris talk today, it really didn't sound like he was too taken with Ridder. I think Ridder is most likely a backup in Atlanta next year. I guess for me, there's still potential. I would keep him at the end of my bench in Superflex just in case, but hard to believe you could count on him to make many starts next year.
Yeah, I think to me, Ridder is a guy that you're holding on in hopes that he flashes a little bit if given an opportunity. I agree with you. He's probably not going to start much next year in Atlanta. It feels like they're going to try and turn it around quickly. So they're going to get a starting caliber quarterback. whether it's as a rookie or one of the available free agents or via trade, Kirk Cousins or one of those guys out there. Ritter has some tools, and he's more accurate than Kenny Pickett. His interception ratio was kind of high, 3.1% compared to Pickett, but he did throw 12 touchdowns last year and 12 interceptions. So when you include the dual threat ability, I see where Ritter might have gotten shaken. It's like, hey, Arthur Smith says, look, Ritter is our guy the rest of the way. And the next week he benches him. And it's like, I get it. He wasn't playing great, but you've got to, to me, those are the types of things when a coach does that loses a locker room. You don't say this guy's it the rest of the way. And if he doesn't get injured, he just plays poorly, you bench him. And not just bench him like, oh, well, we're putting somebody in here with 3 minutes to go in the third quarter because you've thrown 4 interceptions. Let's just watch. But it's like, no, you're not starting next week either. After you were like in the media saying, hey, this is our guy the rest of the way. It's
just kidding.
Yeah, it was a hot mess. Ritter was the guy I liked. I think I had him as my QB3 in this class. Sam Howell was my guy out of this class. Ritter might have been my 2. But I think there's a chance if he sits for another couple years, and let's say they get somebody that is a good quarterback in front of him, and he gets to actually learn, he's got a good coach, and he gets to learn for the next couple of years, there's a potential in 2026 that he goes as a free agent and he goes somewhere and gets an opportunity to compete. And maybe that is, it used to be that way where you were, now free agency has made it so you can't really wait 5 years to start a quarterback. But
Green Bay just said, hold my beer.
I like Ritter's athletic ability. He's got a big arm. He's mobile. If he can get his completion percentage up, not throw interceptions, find an offense that suits him. So, with QB 22 finish last year, it's not great, but he was able to do some stuff. He finished better than Pickett. Now he played 15 games, started 13, so he did have.
Pickett started 12, so he only started one more game than Kenny Pickett.
Ritter is one of those hold at the end of your bench because it's a super flex league, and you never know.
Which makes him better than a couple of the guys that followed him. Immediately after him was Malik Willis, who also went in the 3rd round, 86th overall to Tennessee. He got into a few games as a rookie, started 3, went 1 and 2, looked horrendous, barely 50% completion, 276 yards and 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. Last year, they took Will Levis in round 2, and Levis was the one that got in. Malik Willis limited to 4 or 5 for 74 yards and his lone, few appearances there. I don't see Malik Willis as a player I'm rostering.
Yeah, he is cuttable. Maybe he goes somewhere where he can be a QB3 behind a starting quarterback that can run a similar offense. He needs to be in a low-volume passing offense with a mobile quarterback because that's just how he plays. That's the skill set he brings to the table. But I feel like this is, it's probably going to be his only contract.
Next up, the last of the 3rd round quarterbacks was Matt Corral, a guy coming out that some people like potentially the best prospect. He was a little snake bitten as a rookie in Carolina, probably would have gotten a chance to show something if he hadn't broken his foot and ended up on IR pre-season. Then Carolina took Bryce Young. He became expendable, went to the Patriots, and we know the Patriots quarterback woes from last year wasn't even good enough to get off their practice squad. I don't think he's currently even attached to an NFL roster. I see no point in holding him on my dynasty roster. Do you think he's ever going to get another NFL shot?
So I just thought I saw something the other day. He signed with a CFL team, maybe.
Could have been.
Maybe I don't think it was the UFL, but I could be wrong.
We'll see. I know that he's not on.
He's not on.
No, he went to the UFL, Birmingham Stallions.
Okay, so there's no substitute for reps. I get it. You need to, as a backup, you have to be able to get mental reps. But sometimes, man, you just need a whole heap of physical, actual reps. I don't know what the UFL to NFL pipeline is going to look like. I know last year, whether it was the XFL or the USFL, there were some quarterbacks that were kind of exciting, namely Alex Magoo, who did not really get a shot in the NFL. And
I think only a few of the guys, like PJ Walker, has bounced around. McCarron went back to the NFL and then now is going back to the UFL. But there hasn't been, you probably count on one hand the number of guys out of these spring leagues who've even had a recognizable role. Donald Parham,
right,
one of the better success stories.
I think quarterback is the hardest position to do that with, but also we've seen if the UFL is going to be successful, they need to figure out how to develop backup NFL quarterbacks. If they can do that, the NFL, that will get the NFL's attention because that's the Achilles heel for the NFL. We see it all the time. There's just not enough good quarterbacks in the NFL. And if you can become a Charlie Whitehurst, a Chase Daniel, a Jameis Winston, I don't want Jameis Winston starting. I feel like he probably should have gotten another opportunity. I think we're past that now. But if Jameis has to go in the game, I think we expect him to be a professional quarterback, not like some of these, not like Malik Willis. Yeah. Not like, Kendall Hinton. So
Kendall Hinton wasn't really a quarterback, though. He's a wide receiver at the pro level.
But he had to play quarterback because they didn't have another quarterback. Wasn't a good thing. So if the UFL can figure out how to develop NFL backup quarterbacks, I think they're going to be a very successful league because that's of value to the NFL. So maybe Matt Corral does that. Maybe he goes to the UFL, gets a bunch of reps, is able to get in an NFL camp in a year or two, and stick as a backup. And to be fair, that's like one of the best jobs in the world if you got a good quarterback in front of you.
Fun fact, in the game where Kendall Hinton took reps at quarterback, he isn't the credited starting quarterback. Do you know who was?
Nope.
Philip Lindsay took the first snap under center. The next quarterback in this class, taken fourth round, number 137 overall, was Bailey Zappi. Went to the New England Patriots. He's actually started 8 games in his 2 years. Got a long stretch last year and wasn't great, Bob. 2-4 as a quarterback record, but 59.9% completion percentage. Not really going to get it done. 1,272 yards, 6 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I think he's probably we probably thought he was a career backup before last year. I still think that he's actually a career backup that unless I needed to do a pickup midseason, I wouldn't really consider rostering at this point.
Yeah, I think if Zappi sticks in New England for next year, depending on what they do with their quarterback position, he's maybe a handcuff. I think so. As NFL fans and fantasy managers, Zappi's first taste of the NFL, just confused us because he played decent. And we thought, oh, well, maybe he is better than Mac Jones. There was a lot of that out there. He's not better than Mac Jones. He doesn't have a better arm than Mac Jones. He doesn't make better decisions than Mac Jones. He doesn't have the ability of Mac Jones.
He
And
might
I
have been
say
a better teammate, though, from all that we've read.
I say this not as a Mac Jones stan, just as a guy who's watched them play football. And so is that Mac's fault that the owner took a liking to him and he felt like he could talk to the owner directly? I don't know. Mac looks like a politician, like a senator. When he's done with the NFL, he's going to go back to Alabama and he's going to run for office. That's just it looks like who he is. But until then, I don't think Mac is going to be back in New England, so Bailey is going to have a leg up there. But Bailey Zappi is nobody's future.
The next player in the order might be one of the most interesting in this class, and that is Sam Howell. You referenced that he was your favorite coming into the draft. Ended up going 5th round, 144 overall to the Commanders. Didn't really see the field much as a rookie, just kind of got a taste in his last start, but started 17 games for the Commanders last year, 4-13. Arguably would have been benched if Jacoby Brissett was healthy. At least that's what Ron Rivera said. Threw it 612 times, ended up with 63% completion percentage, 39-46 in yardage, 21 touchdowns, 21 interceptions, not great, 65 times he was sacked, so wasn't getting a ton of protection. Did run for 263 yards and 5 touchdowns, added 4 additional fumbles to his total. His future's not in Washington. That seems pretty clear, but there have been interesting discussions that they may move him somewhere. One of the interesting rumors I thought was that the Jets were interested in putting him behind an Aaron Rodgers, and that's one of the reasons why, even though I don't think Howell is a starter somewhere in 2024, he's another guy I would keep on the end of my Superflex bench because I think there is some potential in the future. How do you feel about Sam Howell?
I love Sam Howell. I love the grittiness, the toughness. I mean, you remember the old Timex commercials? It takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Well, that was Sam Howell last year. He got his butt whooped a lot. You don't like 21 interceptions. And probably with 612 dropbacks, you probably like more than 3,950 yards. But I think he did the best with what he had to work with. I don't say that as a knock to Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. I say that as a knock to Ron Rivera and the coaching staff he constructed. I know Eric Bieniemy, first year offensive coordinator. I just think that team was a mess from the leadership standpoint. New owner, what was perceived to be a lame duck coach, even though people were all saying no. When you traded away your 2 best pass rushers, you kind of knew it was over there. I don't know. I think Howell going somewhere where let's face it, if he's sitting behind Aaron Rodgers, Aaron's not going to mentor him. But he's going to definitely be an upgrade from Zach Wilson. And Howell is another one of those guys, much like Ritter, that I think going somewhere and sitting for a little bit might be good. Maybe he can enjoy a Baker Mayfield-esque renaissance here in a year or two.
Next guy up, 7th round pick, 247th overall. Skylar Thompson went to the Miami Dolphins, is actually one of 2 quarterbacks in this class to have started a playoff game. In his rookie year, the Dolphins, after losing their top 2 guys, he ended up starting 2 games to end the season, went 1-1. 57% completion percentage, 534 yards, a touchdown, 3 interceptions. Actually didn't play too bad in that playoff game against the Buffalo Bills. Ended up 18 of 45, which isn't great, but 220, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. I don't think most people would have given him a chance. However, last year he was again third on the depth chart at quarterback. Doesn't seem like the Dolphins are too inclined to move him up. An interesting story, but he is not a guy I'm rostering.
Yeah, he's, when he got the opportunity to start, what did we say? Skylar Thompson is playing for the opportunity to become a career NFL backup. So they brought in a second stringer, Mike White, to play ahead of him. If Skylar Thompson is a guy that is going to need to continue to do the right things in practice so that some team finds enough value in keeping him as a quarterback that they feel like, well, if he can do the right things in the offense and not lose us games, 18 of what was it? Yeah, 18 of 45 or something. That's not necessarily doing the right thing.
Well, it was a playoff game against Buffalo, but he was only 57% completion percentage during his 2 regular season starts too.
Yep. So he needs to pick up the pace, get the decision-making process better. But he come from a small school, if I remember correctly. Where was it? He was at Kansas State. Not that small, I guess.
Not known as a passing powerhouse either.
No. So can he be – I think for fantasy, his career arc is one day being a desperation pickup when the starters get injured to eventually becoming maybe a handcuff.
The final guy in the class, they saved the best for last in the draft, and so did we, and that is Brock Purdy, who went 7th round, 262 overall, was Mr. Irrelevant. Ended up getting into it as a rookie after both Trey Lance and Jimmy G were injured, went 5-0 as a starter then. Came into last year as the guy in San Francisco as the starter. Started 16 games, didn't play their last game because they had already clinched. Was 12-4 as a starter, 69.4% completion percentage, 42.80 on yardage, 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Seems like he's still pretty much locked in as their guy. I think he's a borderline top 12 QB for me in Dynasty because of that roster and because of some of the flux in the position. But how are you feeling about Brock Purdy heading into year 3?
So my dad used to say, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. And when you get a quarterback of this quality with the last pick in the draft, that is the epitome of a blind squirrel finding a nut once in a while. I think Purdy plays well within the system, and he has a ton of weapons. He's got good to really very good pass protection, and he's got Christian McCaffrey. The offense is very creative from a scheming player's open standpoint. Well, I mean, Purdy has one game-winning drive in 21 starts. They're not relying on Brock Purdy to go out and win games. Now, 31 touchdowns, it's because the offense is good. And there's nothing wrong. I don't think we can knock a productive quarterback that's completing almost 69% of his passes. I mean, there's merit to that. He's making good decisions. He does have a little more mobility, I think, than shows, but he doesn't have to use it. And it's not like they're calling plays for him to run RPOs or anything and keep the ball. He's got Christian McCaffrey. He's got Deebo Samuel. I like Purdy a lot. I agree. He's a fringe QB1 with the potential to rise up to a mid QB1 if he can establish that he's going to be a 30-plus touchdown guy year after year after year.
Well, that'll do it for talking about the class of 22 quarterbacks. We'll continue our class of 22 look on Friday when we look at running backs, which should be kind of an interesting one. But before we get out of here, Dennis and I did a one-round NFL mock draft. Still kind of early in the process. They're going through combines, obviously, for the next week. But we wanted
Never too early to draft.
wanted to see kind of where we were. We alternated, each of us taking a couple picks at a time. I'm just going to start with the top 3 picks. And Dennis, you made these. You took Caleb Williams to the Bears, Drake May to the Commanders, and Jaden Daniels to the Patriots. Do you think there's still a good probability we see 3 quarterbacks in a row? And if these were the landing spots, how would you feel?
So right now, these are the chalk picks. So unless the Bears keep Justin Fields, they're going to go quarterback. And
if they do,
we
Fields,
are
I think
in
they move the number 1 pick.
We're in silly season, so every player is getting put under the microscope and picked apart. It's going to be analysis paralysis going forward, over analysis, finding a reason. Oh, he's only 6'1.5" or oh, Drake May only weighed 215, not 230. So that's where we're at. The expectation, I think, is that the Bears are going to move on from Justin Fields, which means they're going to draft a quarterback. Could they fall in love with Daniels, who had a phenomenal year and won the Heisman Trophy? Could they fall in love with Drake May, who has that prototype build and size? Yes, those things could happen. But I think looking back over the last 3 years, Caleb Williams is a phenomenal prospect. And I think we come off the board, Williams at 1. Maybe the wild card could be Daniels over May at 2. But I don't think if New England is sitting there at 3 and Drake May is there, they're not going to pass either. So I feel that these 3 teams, if the Bears trade away Fields, all have huge quarterback needs. And this class, it's not like the 21 class where Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback drafted. This class isn't like that. We could see 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. So I like these 3 picks in this order.
Yeah, and I think for me, for fantasy, like if these were the landing spots, I would probably like whoever goes to the Commanders the best, and definitely whoever goes to the Patriots the least, because Patriots have so many other issues. I mean, yes, you have to solve quarterback, but also I just think about what happened to poor Bryce Young, where he was the number 1 overall draft pick and lands in a spot where they have Jack all around him and a new coaching staff. And it just, it wasn't great in year 1. Maybe he'll get there, but it wasn't great. I'm going to do the rest of the top 10, and then we'll kind of pick out some of the fantasy options. I took the next 3 picks. I took wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Arizona Cardinals, a cornerback Nate Wiggins to the Chargers at 5. I took another receiver, Malik Neighbors, wide receiver to the Giants at 6. And with Tennessee at 7, you took an offensive lineman, Olu Fashanu. For the Falcons at 8, you took Terrion Arnold, the cornerback. And for the Bears at 9, Romeo Oduns, the wide receiver. Then rounding it out, I have the Jets at 10. I also took a lineman, Joe Alt. And I think, for the Jets, it makes sense. They have a lot of pieces. Line was killer for them going there. Chargers, there are a lot of possibilities there, but it seems like they're going to kind of focus on rebuilding the defense, so I lean there. But we see a couple of the wide receivers go here. It's supposed to be a good wide receiver class. What do you think of these 3 guys?
So I think Marvin Harrison, my concern right now is that today's the first day of the combine and he's in Columbus and is kind of not giving any indication.
He said he's not
indication that
going
he's
to the combine. He
right.
already
Which
announced that he's not going to go to the combine and that he may not even do a full reps at his pro day. I don't know that he needs to because he's everybody's top receiver.
I get it, but to me, that sort of like he's been the anti-diva all this time. And then all of a sudden he's going diva because that's what that is. So
But I
I
mean,
get it.
so
He's good. He's
here's a
really, really
question for
good.
you about the combine. We have seen a whole spate, a ton of big time coaches that are also not bothering to go to the combine. I've seen a lot of talk that the combine and what it used to mean is sort of fading down, that a lot of people are more interested in going to pro days and bringing in the guys they want for their interviews and relying on their scouting department. So I don't know if it's that big of a deal, or that I would say it's being a diva not to go to the combine.
Maybe. I mean, maybe I'm just not accepting the speed at which it's changing. You are correct, and I did see or hear several head coaches were not going to the combine. But for me, I feel like it isn't necessarily always about the Marvin Harrisons from the coaching perspective. And it isn't about the on-field workout necessarily from the Marvin Harrison perspective. You want to see these guys interacting with people and maybe in some challenging situations and be able to, you want to spend as much time as you can, whether you're the player or whether you're the organization, with each other. Because how do you know that you're not going to go, hey, I'm not playing for you if you don't spend any time with them? Like, would Eli have really said, hey, I'm not going to San Diego if he hadn't spent time with San Diego? Because let me tell you,
They were
San
out on that
Diego is a hell
organization.
of a lot nicer than New York City.
It wasn't the physical location; it was the organization. And I
Right.
recall his
But
dad having a lot to do with that. I mean, so you make that argument. They didn't have all these kind of combine and this whole process when John Elway was drafted, and he definitely did the same thing. He's like, there's a snowball's chance in hell I'm playing for you, Indianapolis. If you take me, I'm going to play baseball. We saw Kyler Murray play hardball with some people about that. I mean, I don't know that that has to do with the combine. To me, I feel like something like the combine means more to guys that are hoping to get drafted, or guys who, come into the combine with a fifth, sixth
need
round
to
grade and
improve
can
their
work
stock.
themselves up than somebody. I read somewhere that Marvin Harrison Jr. probably by participating in the combine could do nothing but risk lowering his, which we've seen that happen before with guys who came out and were top prospects. But let me ask you this: so if Harrison lands with the Cardinals, which seems like a decent bet, I think at this point in time, he's largely regarded as the best rookie pick in non-superflex leagues. Do you think he's still, would that be a good landing spot for you?
So what you're looking for your fantasy team is a path to opportunity. And if he lands in Arizona, it's wide open. He's better than Michael Wilson. Hollywood Brown is a free agent. Like Rondale and Greg Dortch have to stand on each other's shoulders to be as big as Marvin Harrison. It becomes Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride.
And I actually kind of like that offensive mix. If that happened, I'd feel better about Kyler Murray too. And I thought it was nice Arizona kind of made it clear that they're fully committed to Murray and he's their guy.
Yeah. So no, I mean, I get probably why he's doing it, and you're correct. He can't do anything but hurt himself. The other thing being, if he comes out and he's not as good, then I think teams now, the next time somebody pulls that, they're all going to say, well, yeah, and Marvin Harrison did it, and he had the pedigree, he had the college stats, he had the size, and he came out and didn't make a single Pro Bowl, didn't have 1,000-yard season in his career, stuff like that. So, it kind of goes both ways. But
Yeah.
I love Marvin Harrison. I'm a Buckeye through and through. So I just, maybe I'm too old. Maybe I just want him to go there, stand against the wall, get on the scale, have those official numbers. Malik Neighbors, I think he's going to be really good. And going to the Giants, they need an alpha wide receiver. I know they drafted Jalen Hyatt last year. Hyatt he kind of reminds me of Jamison Williams. This a little, Deshaun Jackson. Can these guys be super productive? Yes, they can. But they're deep threats. They're high ADOT players. Malik Neighbors is going to bring a lot of that, but he's also a guy that can play over the middle. He can be the alpha receiver. Odunze, he's a little bit different he's probably more similar to Marvin Harrison. I think too, I don't think Harrison is extremely fast. I think he's fast enough. I don't think Odunze is going to be, a burner. I would be surprised if he was, under 4.48. I would expect him probably to be in the 4.5 range, maybe 4.52, 4.53 versus Neighbors. I think will be under 4.45. I think they're all looking like high level fantasy assets. I kind of see in one QB leagues them coming off in that order: Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze, with maybe 5 times out of 100 somebody taking Neighbors over Harrison. I don't think you'll have the occasional person that falls in love with Odunze and takes them over Neighbors or whatnot, or maybe where he lands. They just believe the path to touches is better. But I think some of these guys like Fashanu in Tennessee, that's going to help Will Levis a ton. Keep him upright. They drafted Skoronski last year. Skoronski played tackle in college, but is an NFL guard. Now they install another offensive tackle, legitimate offensive tackle. Joe Alt to the Jets. I think, did they cut Dwayne Brown today? I saw a headline said they cut a former All-Pro tackle. And I suspect
no, they cut the guy that they signed from the 49ers.
Oh, okay.
You're talking about the Jets.
Yeah.
Yeah, they cut
McGovern?
No.
Anyways. So them drafting a tackle makes perfect sense as well.
Let me see if I can find them. Tomlinson.
Oh, okay.
Laken Tomlinson. And it was a guard. So
yeah.
it would be kind of interesting. So the Jets are planning to overhaul Becton, Brown, and Connor McGovern are free agents. So they didn't have to cut those guys. We are getting close to the hour, so I'm just going to focus. You and I going through a lot of defense, kind of offensive line pieces for a lot of these teams, which I think is probably what we end up seeing a lot of years. I think you and I are probably in agreement. There's no chance of running backs going in the first round, probably not even in the second round, the way it's going. We did take 2 more quarterbacks. I had Denver at 12 and took J.J. McCarthy. You had the Raiders at 13, took Michael Penix Jr. And we did take 3 more wide receivers. I had the Bills at 28, took Brian Thomas, and I 30 for the Ravens. I took Keon Coleman, and you took Lad McConkey for the Chiefs at 32. So those are kind of the fantasy assets. I'll say it does feel like Denver's leaning more and more toward being in salary cap purgatory and taking a quarterback there and rolling the dice. And I'll pray for you, JJ McCarthy, and I'll pray for myself and having to watch this team. As I mentioned to you, it's the offseason hasn't even officially started, and I already hate this team. I thought your Penix pick was kind of interesting. That would put him up with Aiden O'Connell, who was not terrible to close out the year. What do you think of those last two, which would give us 5 quarterbacks there right up in the top 15?
So I heard somebody make a comp for J.J. McCarthy in the last week or so. They comped him to Alex Smith.
You're not making me feel any better.
Well, I feel like that's kind of accurate. As an Ohio State guy, I got to see McCarthy up close a couple times. And there were some games where they hit him. They did not let him throw the ball a lot. They, granted they had Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, so they were able to run all over us. But McCarthy feels like it feels like they are looking at it and saying, look, we see what San Francisco has done with Brock Purdy. We don't, if we can hit on a guy that makes good decisions, let's just build around him and give him tools. We don't necessarily need him to be a toolsy quarterback. That's kind of what it feels like with McCarthy. As far as Penix, I think Bo Nix is regarded as the better quarterback between the two, but Penix felt more like a Raider. And maybe that's shoddy analysis, but he just feels like Penix is a gutsy player. His knees have been torn up. He's had some tough injuries. It was interesting, watching him throw, it just seems funny, but I saw somebody reverse it and they put it out there, and throwing right-handed looks perfectly normal. And so I'm like, oh, that's weird. That's like, what's my brain doing? Because left-handed, it looks a little peculiar, but right-handed looks perfectly normal. And I'm like, all right. So, but he's got a big arm. He has a little bit of mobility. He's definitely a guy you want to have protected, which maybe the Raiders aren't the right place to go. I think he can be productive. It wouldn't surprise me if Penix fell into the second round, though.
Yeah, and I think if the Raiders isn't a terrible choice, I had wondered too if he slides a little bit. If Seattle might not look at him, because isn't that where his college offensive coordinator went to Seattle, and that,
yeah.
And Gino, we know he's here in 24, but probably not beyond that. So let's close. We mentioned that the wide receivers. I think Buffalo will not re-sign Gabe Davis. They say all the right things about Diggs, but I feel like that's still volatile. And as much as I like Khalil Shakir, I don't think he's the only receiver that they will want to run into the season with. So it made sense to me that they would go and get a receiver. So I did that. And I think same's still kind of true for the Ravens. We talked about Bateman not really panning out.
Didn't you hear? Harbaugh said he's going to get the ball a lot more next year.
I'll believe it when I see it. Flowers had a pretty good rookie year. I don't know that they bring back Beckham. I think they still need some weapons. And then, it seems like the Chiefs are always in need of weapons.
Yeah. So McConkey is a guy, not big, 5'11 and a half. He's got decent size at he's not tall. He's right around 195, 200 pounds, but I think he has a lot of the traits that Travis Kelce has. And I feel like when Kelce retires, this offense is going to change. You're going to, in part because you don't just pluck Travis Kelce's off trees somewhere. I know we're all hot on Brock Bowers, and we loved Kyle Pitts, these otherworldly athletic talents. Pitts hasn't worked out like we had hoped. Bowers may or may not. But the Kansas City offense is going to get reimagined. And so McConkey has good speed. He's a really good route runner. He gets open. He can play outside. He can play inside. And I think he's somebody that can play as that second receiver until Kelsey retires, and then they figure out where they're going with the tight end position and the offense. Playing with Patrick Mahomes is always going to be plus expected value. He's a great quarterback. And so when you have wide receivers that can get open, like McConkey can, McConkey, and Rashee Rice, I think that it's kind of sets that offense up to reload, not necessarily to have to rebuild.
Well, that'll do it for us today. I'm sure we will do another mock draft or two, maybe get a few more rounds. It'll be interesting to do some after the combine. I reflected afterward that neither of us took Brock Bowers, and I had thought about him in a few places, but I just didn't see. A lot of times I would end up with teams I just didn't see them needing a tight end. So I wonder if a similar situation will occur. We will see. Dennis, combine's ongoing, but if people are looking to fill those void hours, we get quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers all together on Saturday. So not a lot of fantasy positions going during the week here. But what can they do to fill that time?
They can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that subscribe button, download, listen, and leave a comment. I didn't even notice we didn't draft Bowers. I guess I just expected you had when I was that's he's gonna go in the first round.
I know it just there it was actually a few of the teams that landed to you were places where I think I would have taken him. Because a lot of the teams that I ended up with, I can't fathom them taking a tight, like Buffalo's not taking another tight end unless they too are hoping to win on the wishbone, and you never know in this day and age. But that'll do it for us today. We will see you on Friday. We'll see what treasures we can mine from the combine, or at least from coaches from the combine, and we will look at the running back group from the 2022 draft. Some really interesting names, especially as we're talking about fantasy, from the first round all the way to the 7th round. So looking forward to that. We will see you on Friday.